At 11:14 p.m., a state trooper leans into a driver's window and says something that sounds harmless. Mind stepping out for me real quick? The driver hesitates, not because he's aggressive, not because he's hiding drugs, but because he remembers one sentence. Officer, before I exit the vehicle, am I being lawfully ordered to step out, or am I free to remain inside? The entire stop changes after that. The officer pauses, his tone shifts, the body cam catches it all. And later, during a suppression hearing, that single question becomes one of the most important moments in the entire case. One piece of knowledge can change how a situation ends for you. Subscribe now so you're prepared. Then share this video and tell me what you think about it in the comments. Because most drivers do not realize this, the roadside conversation starts collecting evidence long before anyone is arrested. Small talk, nervous answers, voluntary consent, casual admissions, even silence in the wrong moment can sometimes be interpreted against you. Tonight, we're breaking down the 6-step script that civil rights attorneys and former law enforcement trainers say can help protect your rights during a traffic stop, and why one sentence before exiting your car can completely change the legal dynamics of the encounter. This is not about fighting police. It's not about refusing lawful commands. It's about understanding the difference between cooperation and surrendering rights you didn't even know you had. And by the end of this video, you'll understand why some routine traffic stops become criminal investigations in under 2 minutes. The driver in this case was 34-year-old Marcus Hill, an IT technician driving home from a late shift outside Phoenix, Arizona. Now, according to court records and body cam footage later reviewed during litigation, Hill had been pulled over for allegedly drifting across a lane divider for several seconds. The stop happened on a quiet highway just before midnight. Now, that matters because late-night stops often immediately raise officer suspicion about DUI investigations, narcotics activity, or fatigue. Officers are trained to look for indicators before they even approach the window. Hill later said he believed it would be a routine warning: license, registration, insurance, maybe a ticket, nothing more. But the moment the trooper approached the driver's side door, the tone changed almost instantly. "You coming from a bar tonight?" "No, sir." "Why are you nervous?" "I'm honestly just tired." "Mind stepping out for me?" Now, this is important. Most people think exiting the car is automatic, that you always have to step out no matter what. But legally, the issue is more nuanced than most drivers realize. And that's why Hill used the first sentence in what attorneys sometimes call the calm compliance script. "Officer, before I exit the vehicle, are you giving me a lawful order or am I free to remain inside?" The trooper looked visibly irritated. "You refusing my command?" "No, sir, I'm asking for clarification." That distinction matters because the difference between refusing an order and calmly clarifying the legal basis for it can become critically important later in court. And according to the footage, the encounter became noticeably more tense after that. The trooper called for backup. Another unit arrived. Then came more questions. "Any weapons in the vehicle? Anything illegal I should know about? Mind if we take a quick look inside?" Hill gave the second line of the script. "I do not consent to any searches." Calm, clear, no yelling. And this is where things started escalating. The second officer walked to the passenger side and shined a flashlight through the interior. The first trooper returned. "So you've got something to hide?" "No, sir." "Then why not cooperate?" Now, pause right there, because this is where many drivers accidentally talk themselves into deeper legal problems. In the United States, courts have generally ruled that officers can order occupants out of a vehicle during a lawful traffic stop for officer safety reasons. That authority comes from long-standing Supreme Court precedent. So, generally speaking, if an officer gives a direct lawful order to exit the vehicle, refusing could potentially lead to arrest in many jurisdictions. But here's the critical part people miss. You still have rights during that interaction. You can ask whether the action is voluntary or mandatory. You can decline consent searches. You can remain silent in many situations, and you usually do not have to answer investigative fishing questions unrelated to the traffic stop itself. That's where the 6-step script becomes important. Step 1. Keep your hands visible and remain calm. Step 2. Ask why you were stopped. Step 3. Provide required documents without unnecessary conversation. Step 4, clarify whether requests are voluntary or lawful orders. Step 5, clearly state I do not consent to searches. And Step 6, ask am I free to leave? Simple, boring, non-confrontational. Because courts often look at tone, escalation, and whether a driver actively obstructed officers versus merely asserted constitutional protections. And in Hill's case, the body cam became extremely important because it showed he never yelled, threatened officers, or physically resisted. But here's where things changed. The trooper finally said, "Yes, step out now, that is a lawful order." Hill complied immediately, and that decision may have protected him later. Because once outside the vehicle, the questioning intensified. Have you been drinking? No, sir. Any marijuana in the car? No, sir. Then why are you shaking? Because there are 3 armed officers around me. The backup officer smirked. Funny guy. Then came another critical moment. One officer claimed he smelled marijuana coming from the vehicle. Now, this matters because in many states, the alleged odor of marijuana has historically been used as probable cause for vehicle searches, but laws vary dramatically depending on the jurisdiction, legalization status, and department policy. In some states, odor alone may still justify a search. In others, courts have started questioning whether odor by itself is enough. And according to later testimony, no marijuana was ever found in Hill's car, but the officers searched anyway. The trunk, the center console, backpacks, laptop cases. One officer even opened a sealed fast food bag sitting in the passenger seat. Hill stood in handcuffs on the shoulder while traffic passed by. And although officers repeatedly said he was not under arrest, he was clearly not free to leave. That distinction matters too, because temporary detention during a traffic stop can legally expand if officers develop reasonable suspicion of other crimes. But courts often examine whether that expansion was justified or unnecessarily prolonged. Eventually, after nearly 38 minutes on the roadside, officers found nothing illegal. No drugs, no weapons, no alcohol, nothing. Hill was relieved with a warning for improper lane usage. But the story did not end there. Weeks later, Hill filed a formal complaint alleging the officers retaliated against him for asserting his rights and unlawfully extended the stop without sufficient cause. The department defended the officers, stating they acted within policy and responded to indicators they associated with impaired driving and possible narcotics activity. Body cam footage was later released after public records requests, and online reaction was immediately divided. Some viewers argued the officers remained relatively professional and were simply conducting a cautious investigation late at night. Others believed the stop showed exactly how ordinary drivers can become targets of escalating suspicion simply for declining consent and asking basic legal questions. No officers were criminally charged, no public discipline was announced, and according to available records, the civil lawsuit was eventually settled before trial under undisclosed terms. Now, was the stop lawful? In parts of it, probably yes. The initial traffic stop itself may have been legally justified if the lane violation occurred as described. The order to exit the vehicle was also likely lawful under existing precedent. But that does not automatically resolve the deeper concerns, because accountability is not only about legality, it is also about restraint. Did the officers have legal authority? Maybe, but having authority does not automatically mean the decision was wise, ethical, or necessary. That's the bigger lesson here. A driver asserting constitutional rights should not automatically transform a routine traffic stop into a fishing expedition. At the same time, citizens who escalate emotionally, argue roadside law, or physically resist often make these encounters dramatically worse. And that is why the 6-step script matters. Not because it magically prevents arrest, not because it guarantees officers will back down, but because calm, clear communication creates a record that courts, juries, supervisors, and the public can later evaluate. The most effective assertion of rights is usually the least dramatic one. No screaming, no sovereign citizen speeches, no roadside debates about constitutional amendments, just calm statements. Am I being detained? I do not consent to searches. I wish to remain silent. Am I free to leave? And perhaps most importantly, are you giving me a lawful order or is this voluntary? Because once you understand the difference between a request and the command, traffic stops start looking very different.